I think what chastity really is at its core is a respect of the human person, of being able to both look at yourself and look at the person in front of you and say, like, you are someone of value, that your body is something that's really, really important. And I want to be able to respect it and love it in the way that it deserves to be loved. I think that's really what the heart of chastity is. And I think the way that we go about relationships really reveals a lot about how we view our sense of being and our sense of like purpose in being here in the first place, right? The way that we love other people, the way that we express that love, the sacrifices that we're willing to make for someone in order to love them.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Haley Yeager. I host the Truth and Fertility podcast. And before we get started with this interview, I want to share some exciting news that if you are watching this, and yes, I said watching, you will see that you can see my face. We are now on YouTube. I've been posting the podcast recordings on YouTube, but just with the regular thumbnail. Now you can see me and the person I'm interviewing. We have full video recording of every podcast episode. So head over to YouTube, to Truth and Fertility, subscribe to my channel. You'll see the background behind me is still a work in progress, so it'll be slowly changing over time, but this has been a long time coming and I'm really excited to finally have this option available for you. I'll have the link in the show notes below for the YouTube channel. I hope you enjoy the upcoming interview. Welcome to the Truth and Fertility podcast. I'm Haley Yeager. Today we're chatting with Eve Rosemary. She and I met also at Seek a few weeks ago. I chatted with somebody I met at Seek. I made so many connections at Seek. I'm so grateful for it. And so Eve is one of those lovely ladies that I met. She is a chastity speaker, and I know that she has done things for EWTN, Relevant Radio. She shared this message of chastity. And so I was chatting with her when we were at the Seek conference because chastity is such an important topic to talk about when you're talking about the birth control pill, because I can talk all day long about how bad the pill is for you, why you need to get off of it, like all the things, right? I can talk to you day and night about that. But there is a step, a further step that needs to be, or topic that needs to be talked about, because for a lot of women, not all women are just taking the birth control pill for the sake of medicine, right? That the birth control pill is a contraceptive. And so many women are taking it as a contraceptive. And so there's a further conversation that needs to happen when, okay, we've gotten to the point where you want to get off the pill or whatever birth control you're on, you want to get off that. But then what does that mean for your relationships? What does that mean for your marriage? What does that mean for down the road, right? Because now you're going to be hopefully going to be ovulating. So, which means a possible pregnancy could occur if you're having intercourse. So this is a very necessary conversation when we're talking about why the birth control pill is not a good option for your health. How does that lead into a complete lifestyle change? So that's why I really wanted Eve on the Truth and Fertility podcast to chat with her, pick her brain about that specific topic. So Eve, welcome to the show. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? And I'm also very curious to know how you even fell into this realm of chastity speaking.
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited just to be here and talk with you, especially about this topic. As we were saying earlier, I get to talk a lot about chastity, but not necessarily always in this type of context, especially when it comes to birth control. And specifically, then I'm assuming we're speaking mostly to young women. So that's also a really unique opportunity, just to come at it from that angle versus usually I'm giving talks to like everyone, little like middle and high school students about chastity, which is I love what I do. And you mentioned too how I got into that. So I grew up actually doing a lot of speaking. I'm only 22 years old, so that kind of maybe puts a little timestamp on where we're at. So grew up in high school doing speech and debate. I did Miss America when I was younger. Went to Miss America, competed there. It was an incredible experience. So I kind of grew up doing a little bit of speaking and noticed that I really enjoyed it. And then when I got to college, I was at Benedictine College studying theology, thinking I wanted to be a teacher. And I guess I kind of ended up doing that in some ways, but I was volunteering on Benedictine's Ministries retreat team. And on these retreats, sometimes they'd ask you to give a testimony or give a talk. And I was like, oh, you know what? Like, this is up my alley. Like, I did speech and stuff like in high school. Like, this is like I don't even need to bat an eye at this, right? Like I could do this. So I volunteered to give some of these testimonies, and it was on those retreats that I was like, wow, there is something really special here about me being able to talk about my faith in this way. Like I knew that I liked speaking, and maybe I was just going to keep doing Miss America or do something like that so I could keep having that passion. But then once I found that my faith was so intertwined with this love for speaking, that's where things really changed for me. And so I actually ended up graduating with a degree in theology and entrepreneurship to then be able to be a chastity speaker. So that's kind of how the Everyday Saint ministry started. I started a podcast while I was at Benedictine, interviewing other young Catholics about their faith journey, just because I was so impressed by these people who were my age, who were going to daily mass, who are praying the rosary, who are going and actually using the 24 adoration chapel that we had. Like I was so impressed by that that I wanted to give them an opportunity to share their faith that other young people could listen in and be like, okay, like I'm not alone. This is how other people my age are actually living out the faith. And so I was doing that all through college, and then I graduated in December of 2024, so just a little over a year ago, and was able to then make that podcast into a full-time speaking career. So now I travel all over the country and talk to mostly middle and high school students about chastity, and really what that looks like for me is talking to them first about rooting their identity in God and understanding the level of detail and intentionality that God had when He made each and every one of us. Because if we understand that and have that level of like love for God and love for ourselves, because we know where that love comes from, then we can kind of move into like, why is it so important that God has called us to save intimacy for marriage and even intimacy within marriage? Like, why that is so special to God. We talk about that, what that looks like practically in relationships, right? Like, how can we actually make this happen? Why is this important to people as high school students when maybe they don't see their peers living out that same virtue? And really just trying to give them the message that authentic love is worth fighting for, and that their love is also something that's so valuable and worth fighting for.
Yeah. Amen to that. I'm so glad that you're going into this because this is, I mean, it's always been a necessary conversation, but especially as we are more like defining the generations. Now we have Gen Z and now Gen Alpha is coming. Like there's such a difference between these generations. And so there's such a difference in the way that this message needs to be talked about and portrayed. And especially, of course, now that everything is becoming more virtual, like the fact that you were giving that platform to those students to talk about their faith and putting it out for the world to hear. I mean, that's really amazing. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Let's start with the very basic of what is chastity? Like, what is chastity? Of course, it's a virtue, but what is it? Why is it important that women, and I'd say my audience is probably college, young adult women. So if we're talking to that specific age range too, like, why is chastity so important? What is it?
Yes, I think this is such an important point because I think what happens is that we sell chastity so short. Like people hear the word chastity or abstinence, and immediately you start to think of all like the rules and the list of like, can't do this, can't do that. This is what it looks like, super strict, very restrictive. That's what people initially kind of think of a lot of times when you hear those words chastity, or um, maybe you think of someone who's kind of like a prude, right? Like they like thinks that they're holier than thou, that they can live out this virtue. And we sell chastity so short if we think of it as only a list of no's and then a list of like can't do this. I think what chastity really is at its core is a respect of the human person, of being able to both look at yourself and look at the person in front of you and say, like, you are someone of value, that your body is something that's really, really important. And I want to be able to respect it and love it in the way that it deserves to be loved. I think that's really what the heart of chastity is like, how can we love both the physical and like, like our bodies are physical realities of God's love for us. Like these are the things that God has given us to fulfill His mission and His plan and His purpose. And if that's true, we have to learn how to respect them and treat them with the dignity that they deserve. And if it's true about us, it's true about other people as well, which is why that chastity is so interrelated with relationships, is that That's like our greatest example of love. And I think the way that we go about relationships really reveals a lot about how we view our sense of being and our sense of like purpose in being here in the first place, right? The way that we love other people, the way that we express that love, the sacrifices that we're willing to make for someone in order to love them. Because chastity, I mean, it does mean saving intimacy for marriage. It's a large part of it. It's a sense of purity. It's a strive for purity. And that's a sacrifice that you have to make in a relationship. But it's a sacrifice I think that's well worth making, that it's this strive for recognizing the respect that someone else and that yourself deserves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also too, I've seen now that I am married and especially too that I have kids, I've just it's one thing to talk about like, okay, saving yourself for marriage, not having intercourse until you're married and striving for that. But now, especially for me personally, being in that sacrament, it is so clear to me why the church teaches and that the Lord teaches to reserve this special act for marriage, like for the person that you have promised the rest of your life to, because just the amount of baggage that comes and the amount of wounds that come, it's not to say that the Lord can't heal all of that, because he absolutely can, and it's never too late. But it's very clear to me on how wounds from past relationships that have not been chased 100% enter into marriage, even if that's not like you're still a virgin when you get married. There are still things about chastity that need to be protected in a dating relationship, that when it moves into marriage, if that's what the Lord's calling you to, it's like it starting off on that completely clean slate to just learn about this person in a much more intimate, much more personal way that's completely promised in the vows of marriage. So, yes, highly, it's such an important topic. So, kind of transferring now into, for a woman who let's go back for a second. I was kind of pondering like my talk at Seek, and there were maybe between 300 and 400 people there. It was awesome. And at the very end, I'm like, I just told about 400 college girls to get off the birth control pill. Like, that's awesome. Okay,
That is
we're here.
awesome.
We're great.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a Catholic conference, so who knows how that affected them or changed them. But um that doesn't just stop there. Like, it's not just, okay, I'm going to stop taking this pill now. It bleeds into every single aspect of your life, especially if you've never had to practice chastity before because you've been on the pill and that's never really been necessary. Or maybe it is something that you're striving for, but it's a complete lifestyle change. So I want to go into the practicals of what what do you say to a girl that is deciding or is pondering getting off the pill or getting off birth control, but is also then needing to take that second step and not just stopping taking this pill, but now it's a whole lifestyle change. Maybe she's dating this guy and they have been intimate in the past. How does she have that conversation? I know this is a loaded question, but like, what kind of practical tips do you have for women that are in that scenario?
Yeah. Wow. Well, first of all, to congratulate themselves, right, in making that decision, like that is a huge step to make, whether you're making that for like health reasons or faith reasons. All are good and all are glorious, because it's again coming back to that point of learning how to respect yourself in the best way possible. And we know how birth control not only impacts us physically, but also it's something that the church is condemned because it blocks the ability to give life, and that's a gift that has been given to us by God. And so really it's a recognition of like the beauty of our femininity when we're able to just like live um, within the body that God created us as naturally as possible. So first of all, to just like I want to commend them for making that step in the first place, because I remember even in high school, had a whole unit on theology of the body, and we got to the birth control unit, and so many girls were distraught about it, or really upset at my theology teacher actually for teaching these things because they were on the pill themselves, and they were like, well, my doctor told me to be on it. But it's like, well, also, like, maybe you are in a relationship right now too, and that's another reason. Like, there was a lot of women who were really upset at that, even at the high school level. And I just remember thinking, first of all, like, God has given us these commandments to protect us. Like, He doesn't do these things because He wants to see us suffer, but rather because He wants us to see the beauty of ourselves and not be swayed in any way by that, by things that we're trying to alter. And I guess practical tips, you're going to have a lot of hard conversations, and that's okay. So maybe even practically, you could go into that conversation with a list of like the reasons why you've decided to get off the birth control pill, especially if you're, I guess I want to take this specifically at the relationship angle. If this is a boundary that you're having to put in place with someone, is yeah, just to go in with like a really practical, like, these are the reasons I've given up the birth control pill, and because of that, like, I mean, hopefully then, like, the thought process then is, like, towards chastity, right? And being able to heal in that way, and really, when you make the decision to practice chastity in your relationship, it's saying, like, I actually love you so much that I want to preserve your purity, and I want to be able to recognize it in the best way possible. So I think in that conversation, make it really clear, first of all, that this isn't a decision of you like falling out of love with that person, or because you don't like them anymore, or because you're not attracted to them. Because I think that might be like the first thing that someone listening to that type of conversation is going to hear. It's like, oh, this person is pulling away from me. They're going to then maybe grasp on harder than they would if they understood that this decision was not a decision made because you're not attracted to them, or because um, you don't want to do those things anymore. Because the reality is you probably still do want to do those things. Like, we're human beings. But because reason suggests, and because you've made the decision to save intimacy for marriage, you actually want to love this person better as a result. So I think that's a really good starting point for that conversation. I remember when I was in high school, I was in a relationship. We'd both decided to save intimacy for marriage, and I had put up some boundaries in place. But I remember as the relationship went on and progressed, he kind of like kept asking for more in that relationship, and more intimacy, and it was really getting to the point where I was like bordering some boundaries that I had put in place, and I was feeling quite uncomfortable by it. So I brought up a conversation within, like, actually, I've like feel like I found out more information. I was like taking this theology of the body class at the time. I was like, oh, I didn't know certain aspects of this relationship. Like, I don't want to lead you into sin. I don't want to be led into sin. A a relationship should not lead you to the confessional. Like, that's not what love is. Love should lead us closer to God. So like, I want to make this decision to push back on some boundaries, and pull back on this relationship, not because, yeah, I don't love you anymore, but because I want to be able to respect our faith, and respect one another. And at the time, like, I remember him being a little upset by even like that little conversation, and even though we hadn't been intimate with one another, it was still like a really awkward conversation. So recognize, like, yes, it might be really awkward. It's going to be a really difficult conversation. But if you can have the difficult conversation, and if you can both strive for it as a result, like, your relationship is going to be so strong. Like, think about if you can really get through that, how strong is it going to be when you are then in a lifelong marriage committed relationship with them, and you face something really difficult? Like, you've proven already that you can get through something really difficult together. Also, practically, that you can like be loyal to one another, right? If you're saving sex for marriage, and you're therefore waiting for someone, if you've already proven to have that discipline, like, that discipline is going to bleed into other areas of your life too. And I know that that discipline is something that's really important to in marriage, and remaining faithful to your vows.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too, is that chastity is a habit. Like a virtue is a habit. It's something that has to be built. And I mean, we're all about habit building right now. Like that is our world, is how atomic habits, how do we build habits? And chastity is a habit. Virtue is a habit. And so it's not something that comes well, maybe not naturally, but it's not something that comes easily, especially if we've already been in a relationship where we're having that sexual intimacy and then deciding later on, okay, that's actually not what I want right now. That's really hard to then start building that habit. And I so commend you too for having that conversation with your boyfriend at the time to say like, hey, I'm not okay with the things that we're doing. I'm learning more about my faith and this is not aligned. And I think that that's the key is that our faith or like the Christian faith doesn't just teach don't have sex until you're married for the sake of making sure you have no fun. Like it's for the sake of making sure that your relationships are as absolutely healthy as possible. And even talking about the biological aspect of it too, we have a hormone called oxytocin, and that hormone oxytocin is a bonding hormone. It's released when we're breastfeeding as mothers. It's released in an act of sexual intimacy, and the strongest release for a woman that we have of oxytocin is our first sexual encounter. That is the strongest one. And so it would make sense that we would want our bodies to be attached strongest to the person that we've vowed to spend the rest of our life with, right? So it's not because God's like, I don't want you to have fun. It's because the way that we are created, the way our bodies are created is meant to be a gift to that one. And so yeah, it is definitely a hard habit, but I think what you said about having that conversation, having a really awkward, messy conversation that may not go the way you want it to either. And that's prime prepping for marriage down the road because there's some really awkward conversations that happen in marriage too. So I think, yeah, everything you're saying is totally spot on with having that conversation. Now, to kind of push further into that, then what would you say for a woman who is having that conversation with a boyfriend that she loves, and maybe she's not receiving the positive response that she was hoping for, wanting, maybe expecting? What would you say to her then kind of moving forward if the boyfriend is not super on board with that?
Hmm. I think I have two pieces of advice because I think it's going to depend on the relationship. So, one, I don't always want to necessarily like shoot down the guy in that situation. Of just like kind of like I think sometimes girls we have like the mentality like, oh, if he's not on board, like hate the ex, like get after him, like get rid of him. I don't know that is always my advice. That's my part two, is that sometimes is my advice. But first I'll say maybe that's not my advice right in that exact moment. Give the guy a little bit of time to process it. You are asking something very high of him that he may have never heard of before, that he may have never encountered anything like this before. It might not be the examples that he sees, it's not the things he likely talks about with his friends. So, this might be a totally new concept to him. If he is a man of virtue and he is a very good man, you can already see that, like within him, and you know that his intentions were pure in the sexual intimacy you've had in the past. Like, pure as in, like, it was an act of love, it was not an act of use, it was not an act of him just seeking pleasure. If it is clear that if he's a good man, it might just take a minute for him to like reason through these things that you've just presented to him. Like this is again, as we were saying, it's a big lifestyle change and you've come to terms with it. We also have to allow the guy to come to terms with it as well. So whether that is like sending him some things that you've listened to or really resonated with, I think that could be really helpful. Like there's probably something that you encountered that really changed your mind about getting off the birth control pill or making the decision for chastity. So send that to him, and if he takes the time to listen to it, green flag, right? Like that's a good thing. When it starts to get to the point where he's like not even willing to maybe listen to some of those things, listen to your reasons, he's really pushing back, that might be time to reevaluate the relationship because you don't want to be with someone who is just either going to tolerate your values and just not do anything with it, or someone who's straight up not going to even want to abide by your values. Like, you deserve to be with someone who not just tolerates it, but wants to uphold those values and those virtues in you and wants to see you thrive. And to be honest, like on the birth control pill, I don't think that you can thrive in the way that you need to be able to, right? Like uh, as we were mentioning earlier, I've had some health stuff, some hormone stuff that they've like recommended to go on the birth control pill, and I've always said no because I know the impact that it can have on the body. And so if the guy is willing to hear you out, like just give him some time to be patient and be patient with that. Obviously, don't like still be in the middle of that, like making a different decision than the decision that you've given him. Like if you've told him, I want to save sex for marriage, I'm getting off the birth control pill, like that is your decision, right? Don't go back on that decision for another guy. He's um like I would caution women listening to not get so in their heads like, oh, maybe if I still have sex with him, he'll stay with me. Or if like I'm still intimate, then he'll love me more. Like those things are not true. They're not, right? Like if we really want a thriving relationship, that's one that's rooted in purity and rooted in authentic love, where you don't have to question their intention. You don't have to give yourself in that way to know that they're going to stay with you. They should just want to stay with you because they enjoy spending time with you. Point blank, right? Like imagine a love that's so good and so pure that you can have all the confidence in the world. You're not with each other because of anything you can get from each other, but simply because you enjoy spending time with one another. Like that's phenomenal, right? So that's what we're striving for. So really take a reality check. See the way that he responded. Pay attention to it. It doesn't have to be an end. Maybe right then, if there definitely are some boundaries being crossed or some disrespectful comments being made, that is something to pay attention to. Those are definitely flags that maybe indicate that that relationship isn't right for that moment, and that's a really hard decision to make. But you're worthy of love. Yeah, and your time is precious and your heart's valuable, so you deserve to be treated as such.
Yeah, yeah. This conversation actually makes me think too on in a parallel way of a married couple who's going through this, where maybe she's already married and they love each other and of course as we believe and as the Catholic Church teaches and greater Christian Church teaches is that sex is good in marriage. Like that is it is a complete gift of self. But let's say a married woman is getting off of birth control and I know your main audience is usually middle school and high school, so this isn't necessarily like this is kind of getting into nitty-gritty, but it's just making me think of this parallel where now you've made this decision of, okay, I need to get off of the birth control pill, which means that we're going to need to practice NFP. And we're getting into this realm, right? And if you're using NFP to avoid pregnancy, that does require a periodic abstinence, at least for about a week of every cycle, however long that cycle is. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts, advice, ideas about the woman who's in that scenario where it's not just like discerning whether the relationship should move forward. It's like, no, you've made your vows. Like, and of course, like there's also the conversation of abuse and things like that. That's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about like in a good marriage where they're both very much respecting of each other, but now you're taking the pill out of that scenario, and now there's going to be required some abstinence there and like a chastity. There's a brand new view of what this chastity looks like. Do you have any thoughts on that, on like what that conversation would look like, on what that would look like?
Yeah, in my mind, I would think maybe that conversation and getting off of the birth control pill would more be rooted maybe in like the science behind it and the impact that it has on a woman's body. And I would think most guys probably don't know that, right? Like, I think we hardly know that, right? Like, we hardly know what the impacts are and what that looks like and what that means for a woman's body to be on the birth control pill for an extended amount of time. So I would think to come at it with your husband is like, okay, these are like the things I've been learning about the pill and the impact that it's having on my body and what this could mean down the road. I would think a guy would listen to some of those things and be like, "Okay, like I get it. Like I want you to have a good quality of life, and if this is what we need to do, I hope that you'd be able to sacrifice together. Like, right, you're in it together. I think that's also an important message. Like, it's not like you're making this decision and you're on this lone ship and you have to like be the one to have all the discipline. Like, no, you get to rely on each other and you get to just like, yeah, have more open and honest conversations with each other. You get to, revisit that conversation month by month, especially when it comes to NFP. Like, there's times where you might need to practice it, and then times when you might not even need to practice NFP. So you get to kind of keep revisiting that conversation, and I think also keep revisiting the state of your family life in general. So I would encourage you to kind of point out some of those positives in it of um, how it's going to impact your body and your marriage, and your hormones, all those things. I think I would hope that a guy would listen to those reasonings that he's probably never heard of before, hear them for the first time, and be like, "Oh, this is having a big impact. I want to do this for my wife," and then focus on the positives from there. Like this is a NFP is technically like a short-term solution, right? Because the hope is that you will have a child, right? And then, um, yeah, and then you'll get to keep revisiting those conversations and keep revisiting the mission and the goal of your family. Like those are wonderful conversations to be having. So if you can focus on some of those positives, I think that could help the conversation go maybe a little bit better, especially some of those first beginning conversations while you're figuring it out.
Yeah, it reminds me too of something that my husband would say, and he's a little like tongue in cheek, but he's just like, I wouldn't want my wife to take poison, like for anything. But I just,
Yeah,
why would a man want his wife to be taking poison to make sure they don't get pregnant? Like it's just,
right.
of course, that's kind of strong. He's a very strong languaged guy. So, but
Yeah,
I
and he's
mean,
also married to you who's like doing
he's
all this
also married
stuff,
to
right?
me.
Like he
Yeah.
gets all he knows all the things, I'm
He
sure.
knows all the things. Yeah. And so it's like when you set your mind and the men are the man is called to be the protector. And so especially in that married context, he like any man wants to protect. They sometimes just don't know what is good and what is not good until they are taught. Women too. I even in my talk at Seek or any talk that I give, I always tell, I always, if I can, I want it to be guys and girls because it makes sense that like the birth control pill conversation like would be an all girls thing. But I'm really always trying to be like, no, 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 the guys need to know this so bad
Yes.
because then we don't have to have all of these awkward conversations of like, hey, did you know this is actually really bad for my body? I'm just learning this. Now you need to learn this. And that is a lot of people's scenario, but let's try to be proactive about it and let's teach both the guys and the girls at a young age about this because chastity must follow. And so that conversation is going to be required down the road, you know? So yeah, a
Mhm.
lot of it from what I'm hearing from you is just like having the conversation, no matter how messy, awkward, ugly it might be. It's the conversation that's going to lead to fruit down the road. Um, I'm also very curious to kind of birth control, fertility stuff aside, just looking at a dating relationship, because I do have a lot of young adult women listeners in a dating relationship. What should chastity look like? Like what does that look like in relationship? Like what does what yeah, anyways, I'll stop talking. I'll let you talk.
No, it's a phenomenal question. It's actually when I like segue in my talk from talking about like more faith to like specific to relationships, that's where I start is like, okay, like how far is too far in a relationship? What does this look like? And I always give the example, it's like not the question of how far is too far, but like how far can I get from this line? Because isn't it true with any temptation, the closer and the closer and the closer we get to it, the harder and harder it becomes to say no. Like that's just true of anything. I have this whole example where I have a kid come up and like I give him a bunch of candy and like give this scenario of like if you were like over at your girlfriend or boyfriend's house and you decided to like watch a movie and then like da 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 kind of go down the line until it's like obviously it's appropriate, don't worry. Like
Of
till
course,
it's
of
like
course.
like clearly you're not watching the movie anymore, like you're distracted by something else because you allowed little things to happen along the way. Now it's like harder to say no to the temptation when you're in that moment. So the goal isn't to like get super close as close to the line as you possibly can without committing a sin. It's actually like, okay, how far can I get from this so that I can protect and preserve this person's purity in front of me and I can protect and preserve my own purity? Like that's really the question. And so, I mean, there's like some practical things, like physical boundaries, practical wise, of like, I'm not saying everyone has to have these exact same boundaries. These are just things that I've adapted into my relationships. So, I have this conversation with whoever I'm dating, like pretty much right when we start dating, like these are my boundaries, and I don't slide on them. Like this is what it is. And those things include like I don't kiss while we're lying down. Try and always like hang out in a spot where there's always going to be someone around. Like even especially while I was in college, right? Like that was always kind of difficult because you have what your dorm rooms, like you don't really have a whole lot of places always to hang out. So when we moved like to off-campus houses, like, oh, was there someone going to be home, or like the potential of like someone kind of wandering around, and that was always just a nice boundary to have. Trying not to use like the same blanket or like hang out too late at night, things like that. I kind of have put in place in my relationship, but also I think what it actually like looks like as someone who just went to a college and graduated with or went to school with like 2,000 people who are taking their faith seriously and all trying to live out this virtue of chastity. Those are the best relationships I've ever seen in my entire life. Like I had so many weddings on my Instagram this summer after graduating, and they were also beautiful to see because I knew the virtue that they were upholding, and I saw the love that they had for one another, and I saw how strong their love was. In fact, I was able to be a bridesmaid in a wedding for a couple that they were high school sweethearts. So I knew them all throughout college, all 4 years of college, got to see how their relationship grew, got to see how they loved one another. They're now expecting their first baby in a month. Like what a beautiful story of love. And what I picked up on the most from them was that they just loved spending time with one another, right? Just because we take the physical intimacy out of it does not mean that you're not going to have moments of intimacy with that person. And what I mean by that is like emotional intimacy, intellectual intimacy. Like you're going to have such beautiful memories and moments with that person that are not related to something physical, that are not related to some chemical high that you get when you are more physical with someone. Like it is just pure giddy love, right? And learning how to sacrifice for each other before you're even married. I think that's such an important lesson. Like I saw how much they were able to love each other all the more because they never questioned the intention of the person in that relationship. They never felt used. They just were able to like do more activities with one another, right? Like you're not distracted by uh, this physical component of the relationship, so you're forced to do more dates that are like activities or conversation based. So you really get to know someone a lot better. And even as coming from someone who I've been in long-term relationships, I was in a relationship for 3 years in college. Thankfully, like we both were waiting for marriage, but I can't imagine how much more difficult it would be to figure out God's plan for me after that relationship ended, had we been intimate in that relationship. Like, it just gives you so much clarity in the relationship. I think that's the overarching theme here, right? Is like clarity, clarity of like, why am I with this person? Clarity of like, is this person right for me? And then clarity if it doesn't work out, that you can figure out where you need to go to next with confidence because you knew if you could honor God within that relationship, you're now able to honor God outside of that relationship too.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all really good tips. And as you were talking, I'm like, that's so hard. Because, like, hopefully the person that you're dating, I have always been the type of person who is dating for marriage. Like even when I was dating in high school, I always was thinking like I'm not just dating this person to date them. Like I'm dating to figure out if this person is somebody that I want to marry down the road. And so I'm grateful that I always had that mindset because I was able to not be in really long relationships or relationships for longer than they should have been. Um and when I met my husband, where I'm going with this is that when you meet the person that you want to marry, or any person that you're discerning possible marriage with, hopefully you do want to have sex with them. Like,
Yeah,
like,
right.
that is a
Oh,
good
absolutely.
thing.
Yes.
That means your body is working well. Like, it means Yeah, that's a good thing because if you do enter into marriage with this person, that's going to be happening. And so it's a good thing that your body is yearning for that. It means you're healthy. It means that your body is yearning to give yourself as a gift to the other. But that's what makes it so difficult when it's not the right context yet, because you have not given that full yes with your words, with your vows, to then mirror that yes with your bodies later that night. And so yeah, I just am thinking like your advice is spot on. It's just so hard. So what do you say then for the men and women that are having these boundaries? They're striving so hard for them, and maybe they are messing up, and they go to confession and they keep striving and they keep going. But when it's really hard, like what would you say to that? And especially, I mean, I didn't know you were in a really long-term relationship too. So I can imagine, I mean, my husband and I were we were engaged, or we dated for 6 months before we got engaged. And then we were engaged for 9 months. So like it was very quick, but we also just we knew very, very early on, like, yes, I'm
Hmm.
you. So it's just like, why the heck are we waiting for that?
Right.
Uh, but before then, maybe you're not quite ready to make that step, or you're struggling with those boundaries. You have those boundaries, but you're struggling. What would you say to that? What kind of advice would you have for those couples?
Yeah, I would say to examine the time that you're spending with one another. Right, as we said, like, it's a good thing to be attracted to that person. You should be attracted to them, right? Like, I know girls who sometimes are like, they push that part of it aside because they like don't want to worry about
He's such a good
chastity with
guy.
someone or like something. I hear that all the time where it's like, oh, he's such a good guy, and like they date him, but they're just not attracted to him. Like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be with him.
No. No.
But
Someone else will be attracted to him, I promise. But yeah,
yes,
yeah.
right.
Sorry,
God,
go
yes.
on.
Well, actually, no, I've had conversations with friends too that they're like, I'm so worried that, like, what if God just gives me someone that I like connect with so well, but I'm not like initially attracted to or I'm not attracted to. And I was like, well, God wants to give you his best. Like, God's got a great plan for you, and you can trust in that. Like, he's a good God. He does not want us to, like, he's not going to give us anything less than what he thinks that we deserve. And he loves us so much that he thinks that we deserve the world. Like, that's why we're here. Like, hello? But anywho, that's offside from the initial question. And yeah, so to really evaluate the time that you're spending together, are you spending a lot of alone time together right now? That's probably making it a little bit more difficult. Maybe you need to plan some more like activity dates where you're going out and going doing something and not just hanging out at home, especially for like those college students. Like, it's really easy just to get into like the monotony of like, oh, class, we hang out, and then the spots to hang out are usually pretty like private settings or things like your dorm room, which I think hanging out like in your room or your dorm room are going to make it more difficult because there's like no place to sit other than like a bed or something, and you're like, well, that's going to make it so much harder for
Beside the
you. So
point.
there's like,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. So like practically speaking, very, very practical things that you can do are just like doing those group dates, trying to do more activities, always keeping the door open. If you do need to like hang out in just a room, keep the door open, or always make sure that like someone else is home. Doing your best at that. I know that's not always possible. Maybe another like group spot where you guys can hang out really well and have some good conversations, like a coffee shop or something. Like, if you just need to like get out somewhere, like go do something like that. Also, receiving the sacraments, there's so much grace there, right? Like, I don't want to over spiritualize it or just point to like, oh, you can just go to confession and all your problems will be solved. Because like it helps, but we're sinful creatures and Satan will try and tempt us every single time we come and go to confession. But the resolve when we go to confession is like the priest says to go and sin no more. Like, that's the ultimate goal, is to go and sin no more. So to look and like really give yourself a good examine of, okay, if I'm looking at this relationship, what are the times that we struggle the most? If we're struggling then the most, what's like triggering those things? It's almost like like how people think through like addictions, like what are the triggers for those things? I think it's kind of similar with like temptations for sin and avoiding even the temptation. Like, do not go near the temptation because the temptation, especially when you've been in a relationship for a long time, it's really easy just to get very comfortable. So the further you can get from the temptation, the more easy it will become. And putting yourself in front of the sacraments, like Jesus comes to us as a physical being in the Eucharist. We can bring our physical beings to him in all of our wretchedness, all of our sinfulness. He desires to forgive us, right? Like he's our savior, so let's let him save us. And then also let him reveal to us the ways that we can grow in this virtue, and maybe some things that he's personally calling you to that's going to work in your relationship. That is something I'm not able to point out to you because God wants to reveal it to you. So really bring it to prayer and ask God what what's going to help this situation.
Yeah, yeah. It made me think too how that was a boundary that my husband and I had when we were dating. And it was actually I'm incredibly grateful for my husband because chastity was something that he really valued, and he made it very clear to me from the get-go, like, you are not allowed in my room and I am not coming in your room. Like, but we were out of college, or actually I was still in college, but I wasn't in a dorm when we met. So that was easier to do. But yeah, I didn't see his room at all when we were dating. It just was a boundary he made and that I was grateful for. So yeah, that was a big thing. Even just that, like just that kills so much of that temptation toward being unchaste. So I think that's huge. I'm also so curious to know your opinion. This isn't necessarily like there's a church teaching on this, at least as far as I'm aware of, but I'm so curious to know your opinion on kissing before marriage because I've heard different things. So I'm curious to know what your thought, if you have thoughts and opinions on that.
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful devotion. I don't know that I've ever seen the need for it per se. When I've thought about it, I'm kind of like, I hear it, I'm kind of like, but why? I don't know. Like that's kind of my initial like gut reaction is like, okay, but like why is that the boundary? Because I don't necessarily know that maybe it could be. I know some couples that have even given that up as a fast, like they won't kiss for a month or a specific amount of time. And that's like maybe that's even a boundary. Like if they're really struggling with chastity right then, like that's something that they kind of implement as a means of sacrificing and just like not even getting near the temptation. For me, I think that kissing is fine in a relationship, as long as you are. I don't want to say doing so respectfully because I don't think that's the right term, but
I get what you
doing
mean.
so in in a way that's not going to lead you to temptation. I think that it's a you can have little moments of intimacy with that person, and intimacy being like, like a really sweet hug or like a sweet like kiss on the cheek, or a little kiss on the lips. Like those are sweet moments to share with someone, and given like the fittingness of the relationship, I think that it is fitting for a relationship in the next step. What are your thoughts on it, though? I'm curious what you think.
Oh, yeah.
Before you part.
I think it's yeah, what you said is my opinion. As long as it's not leading you into sin. And I think too, like what you said earlier about your personal boundary of like not laying down and kissing, huge. I mean, that's huge because that is when like there's a lot more you can do laying down than when you're standing up. It just is a fact. So yes, I think getting into these nitty gritty of those boundaries, being on the same striving to be on the same page with your boyfriend or girlfriend about that. Yeah, that would be what I would say about it. What you said though about fasting, a thought came to my mind when you said that because I think I'd heard of that before, like people fasting from kissing, maybe for Lent or whatever, when they're dating. On the flip side, that's just for my married listeners out there, during Lent, kiss more, like, if you are married. Like, I think of maybe it's not a fast at that point, but I just think, like, because intimacy is so sacred and it is so special and it does require that context of the married vows, right? if we're saying all of these things and if our listeners are on board with everything we've been saying about that, that means that it needs to be even more, it needs to be happening more in marriage. Like it needs to be a regular, consistent conversation, act like it is a renewal of your vows. So I think actually, I think I was just going to say Lent is coming soon, but I think when this comes out, we will be in Lent. And for those that aren't Catholic, it is a time that we take for about, well, 40 days before Easter to kind of fast with the Lord as he fasted for 40 days before his death and resurrection. And so we join our efforts in him with him to fast. Anyhow, it also made me think too, me single or dating, I don't know if I ever did this, but I definitely had friends who like fasted from wearing makeup during Lent or things like that. And I don't know if I ever did that specifically, but that was definitely like on brand with what I needed back then. Now that I'm married and I have 3 little kids, I think it was 2 years ago for Lent, I wore makeup every day.
Right, right,
Like,
yep.
it's just such a flip of like, I need to start taking care of myself. And a way to do that is to be intentional. And so it's just all intentionality of the different seasons you're in. So I just wanted to point that out, like with marriage, total flip of the switch, like be more intentional about having more frequent intimacy, taking care of yourself in that, but taking care of your marriage in that too. So I totally see how like single and then married, it can be very different. And actually on that note, I know we're getting to our time, but I wanted to ask you this one other question too, because I think that this is a very common question for Catholic Christians who are wanting and maybe are really striving to save intimacy or intercourse for marriage. That wedding night is like all of a sudden we've been saying no, 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 no. And then all of a sudden on this day we can say yes, 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 yes. It's just a total flip of the switch. And so I know, yeah, I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on that too, of like how can we approach that in a healthy way, and I know you're not married, but like even in our singleness, as we are looking forward to that, if we feel called to marriage, that is going to be a reality. And so how do you think we can best prepare ourselves in our singleness to be ready for all of a sudden when it is a yes, like, okay, we are in a context now where this is a renewal of our vows. What are your thoughts on
Mm.
that?
Yeah, I have two thoughts immediately came to mind, and I'll say them so I don't forget them. The first is just the selflessness of it, and then the second is kind of the confidence in the body itself. So first, selflessness, like the whole point of sexual intimacy is that it's like a self-giving act of love, right? And you're only going to experience that specific self-giving act of love with that one specific person on that night. But especially as women, like a tenet of our our beingness, like our creation was the ability to give life, and be life-giving. And when we think of the word life-giving, what that really means is like a sense of like selflessness, right? Giving of myself. So we can practice that day in and day out, whether that's uplifting people in thought, prayer, word, right? Because our words have power over life and death. So being selfless in our actions, being able to serve other people well. Again, I know so often we like think of the wife and we think of the one who's like sweeping and doing the dishes with a smile on her face. And I don't always mean like not necessarily practicing like that selflessness. Like you can do those things like one with your roommates, right? Be selfless for them, clean up even if it's not something that you left there. You can practice that selflessness in the workplace. I've waitressed a lot throughout my life. I'm in ministry, so I still have like side hustle jobs too. And there's like things that I don't want to do in those jobs, but I do them, for the betterment of another person. And maybe something you can do is just think about like, okay, this selflessness is preparing me for my ability to be a wife and a mother. And especially in marriage, that's such a vulnerable act of self-giving. Like you're there for the man, like that's your ultimate goal is like to hopefully add to like his happiness and his like well-being of life, and then bear children. Like your love then produces a third. So that requires a sense of selflessness. So I think that's something that we can practice at any point in our life that's going to benefit us no matter what. No matter, even if like you get down the road and you're like, man, I'm not married and I thought I would be. Well, thank goodness I've been practicing selflessness. Like I still need that virtue no matter what. So we can always turn to that. And then the second one that I mentioned was kind of confidence in the body. Something I have been thinking about, I've been actually reading and taking a course on John Paul II's theology of the body recently. I did, like some stuff in college. I got my degree in theology, but I never was able to like really like get into specific theology of the body and walk through it with someone else. And so I've been taking this course, and it's just been talking about how like Adam and Eve were naked and they felt no shame. And just like this sense of shame that in the fall of humanity and the introduction of like original sin, all of a sudden there was this shame around the body and around the gift, like that the body is actually a gift that God has given us, and it's meant to be like in its full glory. Like even when Jesus was crucified, like he was nearly naked, right? And yet that is like our greatest example of love is Jesus on the cross crucified, showing us the value of the body, right? Like if that has to mean something, that Jesus died on the cross for us and that he gave his body for us. So therefore, knowing those things, we know how important the body is, and that our bodies are actually not meant to be a place of shame, but meant to be a place where we encounter the beauty of the Lord. And so to have a healthy sense of confidence in yourself, right? It's so often like I am someone who has struggled since I was little with insecurities. Like I remember being like in fourth grade, I can tell you exactly what I was insecure about at that point. It's just like been a lifelong struggle for me. And uh in that I've just had to turn back time and time again to like the body is a gift that God has given us, and like that's how we need to understand it as such. And I can only imagine if like that's the way that you're viewing your body, as like this beautiful gift from God, and working on that confidence in yourself, taking care of yourself in that way, it's going to be able to be easier to give that gift to someone else. You're not going to be worried about like your insecurities and all the things that are happening on this wedding day, right? Like you're getting all done up, all your hair and makeup. It's like supposed to be the best day of your life. There's so much to be stressed about. And just to be able to go in with the confidence, like I have been created and made good by God. And like you can always rely on that. And that takes time to really come to that healthy sense of self-worth. And it's something that you probably have to keep revisiting time and time again. But if we can really rely on that, I can only imagine how that will be beneficial in the marriage.
Yeah. Amen to that. Thank you so much, Eve. Do you have any other last thoughts, words, comments that you want to leave for our listeners before we end our time?
Oh man. Well, I would encourage them. I think something that we do often with like podcasts and things that we listen to is that we like listen to them and then we move on to the next thing. So I would just encourage them to take a couple minutes and really think about what God is bringing up in their heart, to reflect on that. Just to take a second. Anytime that you listen to anything, I'm not saying this necessarily has to be this podcast. Maybe you're like, I didn't like this one at all. Like, okay, whatever. You can move on.
Just
But
don't leave a 1-star review, please.
no,
Just
no.
just leave it alone.
No, but if there was anything at all that has struck you in this podcast and another thing that you've listened to recently, actually take the time to reflect on it. Because if all we do is like take in this information and never analyze it, it's a waste of your time. So really
Yeah.
take the time to analyze. And then also, I'd love to keep in touch with them too. So if they want to follow along, I'm very active on Instagram at theeveryday.saint. You can check out my website is where I do all my speaking inquiries. So I speak to middle school and high school students. This is confirmation classes, youth groups, yeah, retreats. I speak at schools and classrooms, the works. If there's any like youth organization, I would love to come and talk to their teens about chastity and this virtue. So all my speaking inquiries are at www.theeverydaysaint.com. That also has the links to the Everyday Saint podcast, YouTube channel, vlog, all the things are on the website.
Awesome.
So I'd love to keep in touch with them after this.
Great. And I'll put all those links in the show notes too, so people can easily go check you out. So
Sweet.
thank you so much, Eve. It was such
Thank
a
you.
good chat with you. Thank you so much. I'll see you
Oh, it's
soon.
been wonderful. Yes.